Tonight, back on Juno Beach 80 years later, a remarkable tribute to soldiers who fought on D-Day. A salute to courage and sacrifice.
Bloody shame, all those kids getting killed, I'll tell you.
At a precarious moment in history.
We must all continue to stand for democracy day in and day out.
The current conflict stirring student action on a university campus. Police move in to bust up a barricade at McGill. Also, talks to avoid a strike that could lead to long delays at the border.
They can create an absolute mess.
Plus, how to spot an eating disorder, the new guidelines.
The sooner you identify an eating disorder, the better the outcomes are.
And a recipe to escape a bitter reality. Life in Gaza, through the eyes of an amazing 10-year-old cook.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Mirella Fernandez.
Good evening. 80 years have passed since the start of the end of the Second World War. The turning point of that long and crushing conflict came on June 6, 1944, in Normandy, France, when Allied forces attacked by air, sea, and land. Almost 133,000 troops landed that day, ready to take on German forces. More than 14,000 Canadians were among them, assigned to storm Juno Beach. By the end of that day, more than 4,400 Allied lives were lost. CTV's Joy Malbin is in France for the ceremony marking D-Day, with a few Canadian war veterans still alive and able to share the story.
On a day to celebrate the last living witnesses to a battle that arguably changed the world, there was symbolism and skydivers, but only a handful of Canadian veterans who were actually there. Boots on the ground, storming the beaches of Normandy, on the sea and in the air. Their average age now, 100. Greeted by royalty.
Standing here today in peaceful silence, it is almost impossible to grasp the courage it would have taken to run into the fury of battle that very day.
Canadians pushing, persisting, determined in a campaign to free France, but it came at a terrible cost. 359 Canadians killed on D-Day alone. Thousands more in the battles to come found their resting place here.
There are no words to describe the immensity of the debt we owe you.
The Prime Minister greeting Canada's most decorated veteran, General Richard Romer. 13 veterans in military uniform have made the trip. Captain Bill Wilson was part of the Allied landings in Normandy. He remembers.
It was a bloody shame, all those kids getting killed, I'll tell you. Sitting out there on the water, seeing all those landing craft going in to land on the beach, knowing damn well that the Germans were waiting for them by that time.
What an honor to see you here.
This likely their last chance to return to the beaches, to remember those kids and the soldiers that were lost. A last opportunity, perhaps, to celebrate the few survivors left as their memory becomes history, passing that torch of remembrance to a future generation. Joy Malbin, CTV News, Juno Beach.
West of Juno is Omaha Beach, where Americans charged forward on D-Day. World leaders gathered there today, not only to recall, but to remind people about current conflicts, wars being fought in defense of freedom. Here's CTV's Judy Trinh.
80 years ago, they stormed Normandy's beaches and helped liberate France and Western Europe. Today, 70 returned to take part in D-Day celebrations and were honored as heroes.
You had dreams, plans, and a future, and you left it all behind, crossed the ocean and landed on the coast of France 80 years ago. You took all the risks for our independence and our freedom. We won't forget that.
More than 20 heads of state marked this pivotal moment in history when Nazi Germany was defeated.
How old were you that day? 19.
But the devastation of the Second World War hasn't deterred new threats from emerging.
It is threatened by aggressors who want to redraw borders. It is threatened by demagoguery, misinformation, disinformation, foreign interference. We must all continue to stand for democracy day in and day out.
It's clear who these allies are standing with now. Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky was invited to the anniversary, but not Russian President Vladimir Putin, even though Soviet forces helped defeat the Nazis during the Second World War. U.S. President Joe Biden likens Putin to a tyrant.
The United States and NATO and a coalition of more than 50 countries standing strong with Ukraine. We will not walk away.
What many leaders have emphasized here is the need for strong alliances to promote peace. That's a message they'll take with them to the G7 summit next week, when once again they will try to present a strong, united front to end the war in Ukraine and in Gaza. Judy Trin, CTV News, Normandy, France.
Palestinian health officials say more than 30 people were killed in the Gaza conflict today by an Israeli airstrike on a United Nations site. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees says the school was being used as a shelter for civilians who fled Israeli bombardments. The Israeli military says Hamas militants were operating inside the school. Let's get to a McGill school building in Montreal, where pro-Palestinian protesters had barricaded themselves, only to be pushed out by police. A face-off followed on the street, with police in riot gear going up against the demonstrators, a barricade being shoved back and forth between them, and the protesters eventually scattering. CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin has been on the scene as it unfolded. Jen, how did this all start?
Yes, Marilla, this was the scene of a face-off between pro-Palestinian protesters and police. This in the encampment that was one of the first that went up on campuses across Canada. It's been here for more than 5 weeks. Protesters earlier today at around 4 p.m. went into the James Administration Building here on McGill campus. You could see them sitting on windows. There were people protesting outside as well, chanting, supporting those who had gone inside. Now, riot police moved in. There were volleys of tear gas, there was pepper spray, and riot police cleared protesters out of the McGill building as well as most of the campus here. A lot of protesters were nursing their eyes. Many of them had pepper spray or tear gas in their eyes, many of them describing just the shock when police moved in.
We were trying to hold the fence, and then at some point it happened really quickly. The police just charged the pepper spray, everything.
Demonstrators say they had to escalate their protest because they say McGill simply is not listening to their demands, and they can't sit by and continue as it was. They had been at the protest at the encampment. They're continuing to do that, they say, but they had to do more, and they say they will continue to hold more protests to get the attention of the administration. Marella.
Geneviève Beauchemin in Montreal. Calgary residents have been asked not to wash dishes, do laundry, or even take a shower today. The water supply is dropped because of a major water main break. CTV's Kathy Lee has that story.
Flooded streets, vehicles swallowed up by the water. Bowness, a neighborhood in Calgary, is the epicenter of an unprecedented water main break.
We haven't been able to shower. We don't really have any water, but now the water's back on, so we're at least able to, flush the toilet, wash our hands, all that stuff.
That water discolored, prompting the city to issue a boil water advisory for people in the area and providing water trucks.
We are going to implore people to help out the community, take water to seniors or those that don't have accessibility to get here.
The city says the break is on a critical pipe, about 11 kilometers long and 2 meters wide, that moves drinking water across the city and to several surrounding communities.
This break, as I mentioned, is catastrophic. We will take the time to get to the exact location and determine our approach once we're able to surface the pipe.
Residents are asked to conserve water, prohibited from using it outside, and advised to limit indoor use. That means delaying showering or using the dishwasher, an effort to ensure there is a supply for emergencies like fire.
Every drop of water will count until we get this repair done.
We got the emergency warning this morning, and then with having a son live with us, we went into full panic mode and thought, you know what, we better get up to Costco, get some water right away, because who knows?
We don't really have backup water storage, and I wanted to make sure that my family had water to last for a few days.
Crews have narrowed down the location of the break and are working around the clock to repair the pipe. At this point, there isn't a timeline as to when the repairs will be finished and when the water restrictions and boil water advisory will be lifted. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced a major cabinet shuffle with some key ministers changing portfolios.
I'm honored to serve as Minister of Energy and Electrification, and I know all members of Cabinet are too, as we deliver on the agenda the people of Ontario sent us to deliver.
Stephen Lecce, Education Minister since 2019, is swapping with Energy Minister Todd Smith. Health Minister Sylvia Jones stays, and Steve Clark, who resigned as Housing Minister over the Greenbelt scandal, is back as Government House Leader. Travelers may need to reshuffle plans if border employees strike. The deadline for a deal is tomorrow afternoon. And if no agreement is in place, 9,000 workers could take job action. Here's CTV's BC Bureau Chief, Andrew Johnson.
It's already on the radar of cross-border Canadians.
We had some shopping we wanted to do, so we decided to come today and avoid it.
And businesses that rely on shipments hauled over the line are starting to sweat.
One of those critical items doesn't get to an assembly plant that then has to shut the line. It affects everybody else's. So I hope there's a quick resolution.
More than 9,000 employees of the Canadian Border Services Agency could go on strike tomorrow afternoon. Most are essential workers and can't just walk off the job, but they could use a tactic known as work to rule. Union members perform their duties in a way that maximizes inconvenience for travelers.
They can impound your car without a court order. They can go through your luggage at the airport without a court order. They can say, go over to that room, we're opening up your luggage, or you're not going to come into Canada. So they have great discretion to ask you all kinds of questions, where you've been, what you've done, what you've bought, what you're bringing back to Canada.
The domino effect of extra questions or longer inspections, a massive backlog whether you're coming or going from Canada by plane, boat, or on land.
The pressure on the government will be so enormous that this will not go on for weeks. Weeks. They'll be lucky if they can go 5 days.
Up to 60% of goods traded between Canada and the U.S. arrive by truck. The CBSA says all borders and ports of entry will remain open and safe.
The union voted 96% in favor of a strike after 2 years without a contract. Workers want pay parity with other law enforcement agencies, including the RCMP. The two sides have been in mediation all week. If that fails, job action is set to start at 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow afternoon. Morella.
All right, Andrew. Canadians are used to having their blood pressure and heart rate checked when seeing a doctor. Now there's a call for physicians to screen teens for something else, eating disorders. Here's CTV's Paul Hollingsworth.
There are new guidelines to help teenagers with eating disorders. It starts with increased screening.
But the sooner you identify an eating disorder and put interventions in place, the better the outcomes are.
According to the Canadian Pediatric Society, since COVID-19, the diagnosis of eating disorders has doubled.
Also the severity of those people upon referral. So the services kind of across the country have really noted an increased demand for this type of care.
To explain reasons for a recent increase in eating disorders, during the COVID-19 shutdowns, young people had more time at home, unstructured time by themselves.
Less social contact, potentially more time on social media.
There was also a lack of access to medical care during the pandemic.
I think all of that coming together has led to this huge increase in numbers that we're still living through now.
A basic checklist helps parents know when to seek medical assistance if their teen has significant and unexpected weight change, fails to reach expected weight or height, is showing delays in puberty, has serious body image concerns, restrictive eating patterns, and exercises obsessively. Kyla Fox recovered from an eating disorder 30 years ago.
There is absolutely a possibility, a real possibility that you can live without an eating disorder. But the work to get to a different level of wellness is a lot of time, and it takes a lot of consistency.
The Canadian Pediatric Society encourages screening for eating disorders, which will lead to diagnosis and improved prognosis. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
Coming up, cooking Gaza style.
The least we can do is provide some hope.
The young chef stirring up attention on a world stage. Plus, the Boeing Starliner arrives at the ISS. A packed passenger train heading to Ukraine crashed into a freight train, killing 4 people. Dozens were injured in the head-on collision near Prague last night. The express train, carrying more than 300 people, ran the red light. Officials say it could take months to know if it was human error or a technical fault. Despite some technical troubles, Boeing Starliner did reach the International Space Station today. The 2 astronauts on the mission got a welcome party from 7 resident crew members.
Little dance party, and that's the way to get things going. And we're just happy as can be to be up in space.
Space will be home for 8 days before both astronauts return to Earth. This is the first time the Starliner has put humans into orbit. And a major milestone for Elon Musk's SpaceX. The Starship rocket successfully splashed down in the Indian Ocean for the first time after a test flight. About an hour after the launch, Starship visibly survived re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere. Straight ahead, a tall tale.
Oh, look. Oh.
A toddler's wild encounter with a hungry giraffe. At an animal park in Texas, parents got quite a scare when a giraffe suddenly picked up their toddler from the back of a pickup truck.
We stopped to feed the giraffes, and I turned around to look out the back window, and I saw the giraffe kind of digging around right there, and then it just grabbed her, and I didn't see her no more.
2-year-old Paisley didn't get too far before Mom yelled. The giraffe dropped the girl. She fell into her mother's arms unharmed. A young girl in Gaza faces danger every day. She hears the bombs falling and sees the aftermath of airstrikes. To cope, Renaud cooks, sharing her fondness for food with the world online. CTV's Heather Wright reports.
On a small table outside a tent in Deir al-Bala, 10-year-old Renaud is cooking what she can and sharing it with the world. Gaza-style white sauce pasta, fried tomatoes, even rice pudding. It's hard to get ingredients, she says. It's very expensive, and some of the ingredients you can't find. But Renaud loves to cook, and it helps to pass the time and keep her mind off the war she's living through. Right now, life is very difficult, she says. I hope to be able to leave Gaza with my family and live a normal, peaceful life, but it's expensive. We connected with Renaud through Hassan Wadi and the Canadian charity Human Concern International. He's been helping to get Renaud some of the ingredients she needs.
She's smiling and she's laughing and she's giggling, and and she's cooking in her little pot beside her, her tent. And, the least we can do is provide some hope.
And while her videos are bubbly and happy, as she was unboxing an aid package, a reminder of what daily life is like for so many Palestinians. Not far from where Renaud is living, several people were killed in an airstrike that hit a car on Tuesday. And shortly after our interview, she posted this video online, saying the sounds of bombs is continuous, and she's scared. But she's also hopeful for a better future.
Inshallah.
Renaud says she has two dreams. One is to become a famous chef one day, and the other is for peace. And while a timeline for any ceasefire plan is still unclear, a report from the United Nations suggests once there is a stop to the fighting, it could take up to 14 years just to clear the rubble. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
After the break, the fight for freedom 80 years ago. The solemn tribute to the brave hearts. We leave you tonight with Canada's official D-Day commemoration this year in New Brunswick. The ceremony was meant to honor the last remaining veterans who fought in France and made it back home. CTV's Sarah Plowman reports.
Their stories, battles, and bravery. At the Moncton Cenotaph today, a crowd said thank you.
I've had the opportunity of spending 3 days with some extraordinary people.
People like 99-year-old George Ferguson, who was 19 when he stormed the beaches of Normandy.
So we were 6 or 7 days, bombed night and day, night and day, night and day.
Or 100-year-old Russell Kay, a gunner on a landing craft. The significance of that moment, that day, was lost then.
This was a job we were assigned to, and we stuck with her till she finished.
80 years on, their achievements were honored, the fallen remembered.
To carry their torch and never forget, we will remember them.
As Commander-in-Chief, I thank the veterans with us today, as well as every serving member of the Canadian Armed Forces. I would also like to honor those who are no longer with us.
I'm deeply honored.
France awarded Ferguson, Kay, and Horace Byford its highest medal, the Legion of Honor.
We don't forget, and we remember.
A crowd there to keep the story alive.
Nobody lives forever. The day comes when you pass on. And when you pass on, you leave memories behind.
Despite the honor, Ferguson doesn't see himself a hero.
All the guys who were with me didn't come back are heroes.
What's important to him is to simply hear the words, thank you. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Moncton.
That's a wrap of the day. Thanks for sharing your time with us. I'm Morella Fernandez. Have a good night.